discussion panel, 30 years of Czech economics and economy. So I would like to welcome those members, the older young economists from early 90s, Pavel Kohout, laureate in 94, Jan Freit, 95, Martin Sommer, who is here and will become bigger once he starts talking. Welcome, Martin.
Good evening.
And Viktor Kotlan. One explanation. That is year 97 is missing. It's Luboš Komárik, but we saw that we would have too many people from the central bank at the same time. So we decided that we will welcome Luboš next time, not after 30 years, but hopefully next year at the big conference of the Czech Economic Society. I explained to Luboš already. So please take place. I will sit here. Now you can choose. You see, if you have choices, you do better. And I am going to be the moderator of this debate. They have approximate idea what the talk will be about. I'm not professional moderator. So I have 4 topics, 4 questions. And the first one is very simple. To make my life easier, not remembering things, I will ask each of you, starting from Pavel, if you could briefly summarize the most interesting and important parts of your life since you got the prize, in your case, in 94. And we are economists, so of course we care about economics.
I don't know which part of my life I should choose because it's been interesting throughout. But maybe I will mention a couple of financial crises which I have experienced since 1994. 1994, that was Mexican financial crisis, if you remember that. Then there was, of course, the dot-com crash, which has impacted me a lot. I lost a ton of money at the time, which I openly admit, but it was a valuable lesson. It has changed my perception of financial theory and also financial practice. And most recently, the COVID experience, not the COVID itself, but the monetary policy during COVID and after that. That was very interesting to observe to this day.
So it's a history of crisis, which was fascinating here.
Over time, I've become a kind of aficionado of crisis. I've studied lots of financial crises during the human history. My favorite crisis, by the way, 1874. It was. It used to be called the Great Crash. Before 1929. Until 1929, the Great Crash was 1874. That was very interesting that we haven't got too much time to discuss it.
Thank you. So the same question to Jan. Hopefully it will be about something different than crisis.
Not entirely. Actually, I wonder. This young economist in 95, and later on, by accident, I moved from lecturing in Ostrava at the Technical University directly to the board of the Czech National Bank in the middle of, or roughly at the end of major banking crisis we had here. And also by accident, when my term in the board ended in 2006, I was on the way back to academia, and I was asked by, I'm not sure, maybe by Vice Governor single or by Governor Tuma to take responsibility for a financial crisis team, financial stability team that I established in 2004. And the head of the team at that time, Vladimir Bezděk, decided to leave for the private sector. So I took it over, and soon after that, the global financial crisis started. So I became the self-appointed head of financial stability and then macroprudential policy department. And by accident, I moved recently back to the board in the middle of the inflationary crisis. So I think I had a lot of luck in my life because of various crises.
Thank you. I also like, as a labor economist, like unemployment high. Czech Republic is not good for that. So Victor.
Okay, so I did my young economist stunt in 1998, and I don't know how it happened. It happened in the way that I was actually doing my civil service at the university. At the time, it was compulsory to go to the army, and there was this guy who said, "You are here doing the civil service, so why don't you do a PhD during that time? You would just be, punching all the way." So I said, "Well, it's probably a good idea." So I did the PhD, and Honza was having the PhD thesis. And then I said, "What should I do?" And he says, "Well, you should look into the yield curve." What is the yield curve? So I got myself acquainted with the yield curve. I did some research on the yield curve, did the PhD thesis on the yield curve, wrote a couple of articles, and then won this prize with the yield curve. And believe it or not, I'm still earning money out of the yield curve. After all this time, it's incredible. So I'm actually head of bank treasury of Česká spořitelna. And as you have all, and we have all learned, banking is mainly about maturity transformation, and that's the yield curve. So, it's just an illustration, a moment in time. You learn about yield curve, and then 30 years later, you wake up and you are still making money out of the yield curve. So thanks for that, Honzo.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for helping me. But this was not much for mutual comments and debates, my personal life or career life. So let me step to the other questions.
One speaker left.
That's the disadvantage of hybrid sessions that I forgot about another important. So please, Martin, the floor is floor. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel, very much. And as I listen to the fellow panelists, it's clear that you were all very much inspired by the events of the 1990s. There was the element of the financial and foreign exchange crises. I was personally also very much inspired by the inflationary shock, the early days of the transition, and then another one after the FX crisis. There were also the elements of sort of the continued struggle to maintain budgetary discipline. There was also the very big importance of structural reforms, the timing of sequencing. And what's really interesting, sort of looking back over the past couple of years, is that all of these elements keep playing in one way or another, maybe surprisingly so, given all the progress that policymakers have done in learning about economic developments. But nonetheless, it's the reality of life, recurring crises, and very often they just show up in places that are not very much expected. So nowadays, I'm working at the IMF. I'm heading a division which is in charge of the fund's use on external sector policies of our members. What it means in practice is that we are thinking of questions such as, under which conditions does it make sense for central banks to conduct foreign exchange intervention? In what circumstances is it sensible to either impose or maintain capital controls? More broadly, we are thinking about how the IMF should be thinking about external sector assessments, and we guide our country teams in their dialogue with the country authorities. And my team is also looking after the global trading system, which, as you can imagine, is right now a hot button issue, given all the pressures and tensions in the global trade, and also the resurgence of the trade policies. So it's a very broad portfolio, and I did want to make a general point, also reflecting on what Karel Diva said at the beginning, that it was actually really important for the Czech economic society to establish this prize. It's really important for the young economists to get a feedback in their career. It's a signal that they are on the right track, and so congratulations for all the winners today. Over to you.
Thank you. So I will proceed to the other topic I prepared for the debate. In fact, I will go in the opposite order, but then you are expected to comment if you feel something deserves comment. So I'd like to ask, try going back in your memory to early 90s, to the economics you remember of those times, how you understood economics, how you viewed economics, and how you see it now. Now meaning 30 years later, very experienced after some professional life experience. Is there something in very strong contrast? Is it in line? Is your what you found in line with your expectations or beliefs? Could you tell us your own experience, view of it, Martin, please?
Thank you, Daniel. So, I mean, clearly, as I've mentioned, some of these sort of policy issues keep recurring in various forms. And I mean, clearly, the pandemic was a very interesting moment. Hopefully, it was a once-in-a-century moment. And so the policymakers went in with what they knew, which was sort of really tackle the challenge with very substantial fiscal and monetary stimulus. I think what then sort of happened after the fact is that actually it has proven quite challenging to engineer a successful exit from some of these supportive policies. There was an inflationary wave in a number of economies that is now being tackled very well in most countries. But let's say the fiscal policy makers still have job to do in terms of recreating the fiscal space that was diminished in many cases. So it's an interesting sort of twist, on the all sort of policy-making issues, and for further research, for the academic research to think about how to tackle these very complex situations with the mix of demand and supply shocks. I would like to also mention sort of another lesson. Going back to the 90s, the mobile phones were sort of getting started, right, and computers and the internet. And there was a very reasonable expectation, which was later on sort of borne out by the facts, that there will be some element of sort of ICT revolution and higher productivity. One open question is whether we are again sort of now at the verge of another wave of sort of technological leap like this. Certainly the generative AI has been in the news recently. There are just a lot of questions how this will play out. Again, an important area for academic research. We don't really have great frameworks right now to think about how the generative AI could impact productivity. We certainly have some good stories about how AI could impact labor markets. Is it going to be a substitute or complement for labor? In reality, probably both, but there is just a lot of work to be done in that area. And maybe as a final point, climate change. So that has always been on everybody's mind, but clearly now there is a very big urgency to tackle that issue. And clearly, again, a lot of work remains to be done on the policy side to tackle this. Over to you.
Thank you. So if I go back to Victor, do you see the yield curve still in the same way as you saw it when you started in the 90s, or it's totally different understanding of it?
Yeah, now it's okay actually, but there were times when we, as bankers, had no interest rates. Right? You still remember the negative interest rates of the ECB and the pretty much technically negative or technically zero interest rates of the Czech National Bank here. So this is, I think, something that we could not quite imagine at the time, that we will, for quite a long period of time, actually lose interest rates somehow. And actually the transformation I mentioned, of course, does not work very well in that environment, when you still have the zero or even negative interest rate deposits, but you just don't have any long-term yielding assets where you could place these deposits. And so I remember a time when, my colleagues in Vienna, what they did as a bank is that they actually put a large sum of money into like big storage houses, so that you don't have to place them in the European Central Bank for minus 40 basis. So they had, I cannot mention the number, but it was, extremely high sums of money that were placed in storage houses with insurance, and they were, of course, yielding 0%, and we were paying some 12 basis for the insurance, but minus 12 basis was still better than minus 40 basis the ECB. So that's the times when you think, okay, maybe economics did not really prepare me for this, what we see. Of course, the whole unconventional monetary policy is something that we did not really learn at the university, and I think the textbooks will need to somehow reflect it going forward.
So you'll have it explained, right?
I will be here a little bit longer. The beginning of 1990s was a fantastic era. The era of disco and synth-pop died, and grunge appeared in the world music scene. And here, economic transition started. Actually, the people who started economic transition here were macroeconomists to a large extent. And at that time, we were fascinated by macroeconomics and by macroeconomic policies, macroeconomic policy making. And here in the Czech Economic Society, most of the time we discussed these macro policy issues. And when I look back, our analysis of papers were really kind of grunge punk music. It was very simple, rudimentary. We didn't have data, we didn't have software. So it was very naive quite often. And at the same time, we had one great advantage. We were quite often meeting each other and discussing things. At the time I was at the university, we were not that much affected by administration at the time. We were not that much forced to write a lot of papers because there was no place where to publish it. So there were limited number of journals at the time compared to current situation. And we were meeting quite often here in Prague, elsewhere. We were discussing things. So for me, I was in Ostrava. I sat 3 a.m. to the train. I went to Prague, and we had a Czech Economic Society meeting in the afternoon. Then we went to the pub, and then in the morning I went back to Ostrava. It was fantastic. So I think young economists can, to some extent, miss this kind of opportunity now. At the time, we thought that macroeconomics was a science. I think people naturally lost interest in macroeconomics and monetary economics later on, and he was right. It is not a that much science actually. So I think if we look at the papers that won the prize today, this is really something else. This is quite often true science. So still, I think that from time to time we are shocked by invisible hand of the market, by a macroeconomic shock, and we somehow go back to the basics. And I still would like to invite people, young people, to macro, which is maybe not a great science, but it's sometimes it is fascinating. So that is my comment for the start.
Thanks. So, Pavel, let's see.
Well, some 30 years ago, I was convinced that everything important has already been discovered or invented in macroeconomics, or even microeconomics. Now, I don't think so. I think that some knowledge has been lost over time. For example, in my mind, macroeconomists don't pay much attention to monetary aggregates, M1, M2, M3. This is being published, but few economists pay attention to these aggregates, which they should. For instance, when the COVID broke, the monetary aggregates went up by dozens of percent, 30% per annum, for instance. It was crazy, and it turned out it was. But the Federal Reserve system of the United States was just pretty much quite about that. And now we can see, with the benefit of hindsight, that the monetary expansion has actually caused unsustainable inflation. And Fed was only one of central banks which made similar error. So I think that the quantitative theory of money has been not forgotten but neglected. That's one thing. And the other thing is that to this day, we don't know the optimal recipe for monetary policy. In my mind, inflation targeting has failed. We have nothing better than that. So there is a huge space for inventing something better.
So, do you want to comment mutually on what you said, or you agree, or?
Well, I personally would like to maybe respond to Pavel. Actually, we are living in a cycle, in cycles, and maybe the Milton Friedman and guys like him in the 50s, 60s were talking a lot about money, that in reality they were thinking about credit. And then somehow credit was scarce. So it's, and somehow economists lost interest in credit. But the rule is, once you forget about something important and you lose interest in that, usually after a couple of years you are surprised by the fact that this is really important and the world has changed. So I think, despite the fact that we are not talking much about money or monetary aggregates in the last years, we quite look at credit, which is a dominant source of money in the economy. And I think it's a lot of, I think that this monetary policy making and monetary theory was in recent years very much influenced by someone reborn by looking back at credit. So I will not be that skeptical. I think we made a pretty good progress, and I think we got back to the right track, though we can't agree in the community on the conclusions of it, but I think I'm quite optimistic.
Yeah, one remark from my side. We're talking about money and credit, and we are talking a lot about the past. Maybe a vision that we, I guess, neither of us would like to see. But going forward, if we combine the interest of some of the central banks into central bank digital currency, which is driven by different interests, and there's a lot of work being done, and it's continuing, and it will be continuing, and it's probably in the name of something good. And if we combine that with the development of the politics that we are seeing and will probably be seeing, we are seeing something strange happening around us. Then we have the elections in the US, we have the elections also in this country, and if things go in this direction, and these new dictators somehow come and discover the CBDC as a device that they could actually play with and somehow make sure that the banks just forever don't bother the people, and that the monetary policy, which has all these strange and unconventional tools, just doesn't bother us anymore, then the connection of the dictators in the democratic societies and the CBDC together would mean that in 30 years, when the young economists that have just won the prizes here meet here, they will be, really thinking that this is the need to rewrite the books, because maybe things will not be the same anymore, and these discussions about the credit versus the money will be solved forever.
That's my next question. Martin is waiting for his window. So, Martin.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. I just wanted to follow up on what the fellow panelists have said about the need for taking a more holistic perspective on policies and trying to come up with rich frameworks. At the fund, we are trying to do our part in this discussion, and we have been thinking very carefully about how to actually integrate various policies into what we call the Integrated Policy Framework, the IPF. So the idea behind that work stream is that we would like to bring together considerations jointly for setting interest rates, macroprudential policies, foreign exchange intervention, and some other policy tools. It's not an easy undertaking, but the idea is to acknowledge that in the real world, there are multiple frictions. Maybe there are some balance sheet mismatches. Maybe markets are shallow. Perhaps inflation expectations are not anchored in some circumstances. So what we try to do using this integrated policy framework is to come up with some well-grounded principles based on theory and models for how the policymakers could choose between these instruments, both in terms of interest rates, foreign exchange intervention, and the macroprudential measures. We have been trying to roll this out on a pilot basis among the membership, and the feedback so far has been very good. So this is one area where the fund is trying to make a contribution to the ongoing debate. And again, certainly this is an area where academic research could be very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. So let me proceed further on, but in fact, we tackled already this issue I want to ask about. We discussed economics as science, or Jan commented that not necessarily it's always science. Then we discussed policies, and my question goes to real economy. And the question is simple. Victor already mentioned that. My question is, do you feel, because I think it's a great deal of feeling, that we are, and let's focus on Europe to make our discussion simpler. Are we in a period of some substantial structural change so that the economy, European economies will work in very different ways than they worked before? Don't ask me what before was, whether it was COVID or this energy crisis or, all these things. Or it will be the business as usual, so booms and recessions and so on, the regular things. Should we expect some change of the economy so that we will have to adjust our economics, or What do you think about that? The world or European economy operate in different way during next 30 years, to put it this way?
So maybe two remarks. These guys are very serious, so I'm the one here who's entertaining a bit. So to continue in this division of roles, Martin mentioned the generative AI. You know, before coming here, I was thinking, well, it would probably be a good idea to open the paper with which I won the prize 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And it doesn't open. You know, it's Microsoft Word. I have Microsoft Word, but I cannot open it. My Microsoft Word that I have in the office has the Copilot function. I don't know, you've probably heard about the Copilot being the next big thing. So I'm one of the people who are piloting Copilot. And so it has all the AI advances integrated within, but I cannot open the document which was prepared with the same software some time ago. 25 years seems like a long time, but okay, it's a long time. But still, it could somehow, the AI didn't help me solve this simple problem to open the document created in the same thing. So personally, I'm not so persuaded that the world will change, because I think there is still rather a large difference between the large language models and the generative AI, and I haven't seen any generative AI. So let's wait for that. On the more serious note, yes, Europe is changing. Europe has been lagging, and it will most likely be lagging. But there is a simple reason for that. I mean, Europe is rich, and the rich people have preference for protection of what they have, not for mining more. And once you start protecting and the other guys are still running and mining more, then you are probably somehow overtaken over time. So I think it's quite not surprising that we will be lagging. And I think this is the choice that actually the Europeans have made. And it's just impossible to have these two things combined to be, you know, extremely flexible and agile economy, and in the same time to sit and protect our what we actually want to do. So I think this is just somehow natural development. Of course, my feeling is that our green awareness is just part of this journey.
Okay, I will start back in the 1990s. In the 1990s, the monetary policy practice was heavily influenced and still being influenced by new Keynesian macro that came from the idea of fantastic macro stability. It was called great moderation. I don't remember in my life any moderation, actually. So we started with Latin American crisis, Asian crisis, Czech foreign exchange rate crisis, 97, a huge Czech banking crisis at the end of the 1990s, 2000. Then we had September 11, a global financial crisis. Then we had Euro area debt crisis, COVID, inflationary crisis. So we are all the time in very big volatility here. And despite that, the world, advanced economies, so the world generally, was able somehow to learn, okay, we made things, let us start from scratch, let's go again. As to Europe, and I'm becoming serious now, I'm participating for 20 years on various EU structures, BEAT committees, and so on. And my view that we really are in a deep problem because of severely impaired decision-making here. The biggest issue is collective responsibility and extremely limited capacity to say no to bad ideas. And so if someone in these European structures comes with a not very wise idea, if you say no, you are viewed as a troublemaker, and collectively, we are not able sometimes to say no to the devil, actually. So, instead of acting, we are discussing, and that actually, I think there is a problem that makes Europe quite fragile, because if you do not decide, if you just discuss, and if you don't act decisively, you don't get out of the mess you created before. So I'm really concerned, actually.
So it sounds like structural change in institutions. Oh, what do you think about that?
In short, I would say that business as usual is constant change. If you look at the history of past 100 years or several centuries, you will notice that there was always some kind of change in European economy, and you can hardly spot any time interval which could have been considered as normal. Normalcy is not the European concept. All the time we have some sort of time. This time, however, we are asking ourselves if we can keep our wealth as a continent or even increase it. And we are not sure about the answer. In the past, even despite the crisis and wars and things like that, people were always convinced that the future will be better than the past. Now we're losing, we're no longer that sure. So that's one change which is remarkable.
That sounds optimistic, right? Well, you should be used to this permanent change.
I will tell you one thing. If somebody works in finance like me and investments, you have to be optimistic. Because you couldn't do that work if you were not optimistic.
I just maybe one comment. Actually, I was paid for pessimism for 15 years, so it's quite difficult for me to get back to the normal state. So, but it pays out.
So I'm not forgetting about Martin now. So Martin, you have something to add to our debate?
Thanks very much. I would say that we need to be humble about our ability to forecast. And some analysts have made a point that we always get surprised. Now, we take the current growth forecast over the medium term as given. Again, it's just an assumption. They are actually very muted. And what seems to be a little bit different this time is just the limited scope, for example, on the fiscal policy side, but also monetary policy side, to provide much of a growth support going forward. So what does that mean? Well, structural policies are sort of the key impediment. They always have been, but the importance of structural reforms going forward is really paramount. So I think that's sort of one very important lesson from where we are today. There will be some scaring from the pandemic. Cost and availability of energy is a question, especially in terms of the cost of the natural gas in Europe, for instance. There is also the element of the defense expenditures, and there may be some trade-off on the side of policymakers in terms of weighing these expenditures against other spending in the environment of the limited fiscal space. So again, structural reforms, very critical at this juncture. They are not easy to do. It takes a while for them to reap benefits. But that seems to be sort of the main lesson for today. There is one particular global trend about which the fund has been vocal, which is the risk of geoeconomic fragmentation. Clearly, there's a lot of tensions right now, especially in terms of the trade, and various investment restrictions. The fund has put out various estimates of what this could mean. So it's a clearly an area where a lot of attention is needed in terms of fostering consensus, focusing on the global commons, where all countries have a joint interest in achieving good outcomes, climate, food security, pandemic preparedness, and so forth. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Martin. So we are getting close to our debate, and there is one remaining question I didn't discuss before with the panel, so they don't know what I will ask. In some sense, it will be a rather simple question. I will not ask about predictions, but it will be a little bit personal. So you will know everything, but depends what you will share with us. So, in Czech, there is přísloví kovářova kobyla chodí bosa. I found, because I am an economist, I'm not a writer. In English, they have something similar. You know what they say? Shoemaker's children go barefoot. Okay, so this is the question. You are economist. It's long career, successful career. You make a lot of money for your employer. But what about your family economy? I mean, do you care well about your family savings, your pensions, or you somehow don't have enough time to deal?
Well,
Let's go on from the oldest.
when I was young, for instance, during the dot-com crisis, I already admitted I lost a ton of money. That was very painful. That was a time when I was single. Now, since I have been married, I must not do things like that. I must not lose money. It's strictly forbidden in our household. And I should add that I don't have an employer. I work for myself. And me and my wife own an investment company. And, to put it shortly, she is my boss. But I need to add that I'm happy about that, because I don't have to, I must not do silly things.
It seems economic solution, right? You will simply save a lot of time and other things.
I'm perfectly happy.
I can imagine. Okay, so, yeah.
So I'm known as a very cautious and conservative person, and I therefore end up as actually most people invest most of the money to your family and bricks and mortar. And besides that, I buy electric guitars. So it's probably not very wise. And I sometimes tell my wife that it is an investment. It is not.
Okay. Is it risky?
No, it's not.
Okay, not risky. So buy guitars. Central bank advices.
Okay, so my investment approach has certainly changed a lot. I think 20 years ago, I was buying FX options or warrants and trying to time the even intraday moves of FX. Then I moved, I thought this is crazy, so I moved into picking individual stocks and trying to time that. And then now I'm in a situation that I have, a monthly standing order for S&P 500 ETF. So no timing, no substitute, nothing, just completely blind, investments. And I mean, this year has been doing just fine. We'll see what happens next.
I guess that's best for your sleep.
It is best for my sleep. Okay. And of course, it would be better for my bank if I did something else, but the standing order on ETFs is not exactly heaven for fees. But that's the way it is.
Okay. So, and Martin, you are the last one in Washington.
Very much agreed on the impossibility of timing the markets. I think we all have tried, and I think for me, the personal bottom line is also, regular steady investments. And I just wanted to pick up on what the others have said about the thermodynamics. In leadership roles, institutions, but obviously at home things are sometimes different. And I was very fascinated by the serious presentation earlier today about incentivizing and making sure that, volunteers cooperate. So I will see if I can apply this to my son. Thank you.
So we should offer 1, 2, 3 not complicated questions, please, because we are in the middle of today's session. Yeah, and we have chat, we have people online, so Kamil is making faces to me. So Kamil, bring some interesting questions.
You can ask him.
Oh, so if people online want to ask, let's give them the benefit of asking questions and watch the chat, or we'll watch the monitors. So other questions among people who are here, to our speakers? So you know how to do household economy, right? How to save money and pension and multiple things. Very clear advices, buy guitars, buy good robot who will make it for it, and get a good wife, right?
Right.
And Martin, raise children, spend time with children, and they will take the work for you. Okay. So I think this is a very good economic thinking here presented. Since I don't see questions, I think it's time to get some break. So let me thank young or old economists or old young economists. Both ways, thank you very much all here, and see you after 30 years again.